I'm Elena Mitchell, 32, standing in the back of the luxury hotel conference room where my brother Derek's company is being honored as Tech Startup of the Year. The event coordinator checked her tablet again. I'm sorry, but you're not on the guest list. I watched my family file past me to their VIP table, Derek's smug smile unmistakable as he adjusted his expensive suit. Just as security began to guide me toward the exit, Gabrielle Wang, CEO of Horizon Ventures, appeared. Is there a problem? Her authoritative voice cut through the chatter. Ms. Mitchell is my special guest tonight. In fact, she smiled knowingly at me, she's about to become Derek's new boss. My brother's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. My parents' faces a portrait of confusion. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up as Elena Mitchell meant living in the shadow of a family of entrepreneurs. My father, Richard Mitchell, had built Mitchell Solutions from a garage startup into a regional tech consulting powerhouse. His philosophy of bold risks and bigger returns was practically our family motto, emblazoned on plaques in our home office and repeated at every family dinner. The Mitchell name meant innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, and an uncompromising dedication to building business empires. My brother Derek was the natural heir to this legacy. 2 years younger than me, he nonetheless commanded the family attention from the moment he launched his first business selling lemonade at age 7. While I received polite nods for my academic achievements, Derek's every business idea was celebrated. His decision to drop out of Stanford to launch his first startup was treated like a coronation in our household. I loved business and innovation just as deeply but differently. While Derek dreamed of flashy tech startups and rapid growth like our father, I was fascinated by sustainable business models, thoughtful scaling, and the intricate strategy behind market disruption. When I announced my intention to pursue an MBA and learn the business world from the inside before launching my own venture, Dad's disappointment was palpable. An MBA? He'd scoffed at dinner that night. That's just corporate training wheels, Elena. Real entrepreneurs build in the real world, not classrooms. Mom had patted my hand reassuringly. It's probably for the best, honey. The startup world is so cutthroat and unstable. At least you'll have job security. Their perception of my career choice as somehow lesser never changed, even as I progressed through my education and early career. What they didn't understand, what I couldn't tell them due to confidentiality agreements, was that my role as a venture capital analyst would take me deeper into the mechanics of successful businesses than most entrepreneurs ever experienced. As years passed, the divide grew. At family gatherings, Derek regaled everyone with stories of his fundraising rounds and product launches. Each story ended with Dad clapping him on the shoulder, pride radiating from his weathered face. Meanwhile, my work remained largely private. When asked what I was doing, all I could offer were vague references to market analysis and investment evaluation. Still pushing papers for other people's money? Derek would ask, his tone making it clear he considered his entrepreneurial path the real deal. Must be nice having weekends off while the rest of us are hustling. Little did he know I hadn't had a real weekend off in years. The investment deals I was evaluating ran into billions, and my recommendations influenced the fate of hundreds of startups. But my non-disclosure agreements meant I carried these responsibilities alone. Mom's disappointment took a different form. At 32, I wasn't fulfilling her vision of what a daughter should be. Jennifer from your high school just opened her 3rd boutique, she'd comment during our monthly calls. And she still finds time to date. I heard she's getting serious with that doctor. Each family Christmas, Thanksgiving, or 4th of July barbecue became an exercise in restraint. I listened to Derek's startup stories, embellished for dramatic effect, while Dad nodded approvingly. I'd help Mom in the kitchen as she lamented my lack of a husband and children, as if my career was merely a placeholder until my real life began. My achievements, the billion-dollar unicorn I'd discovered, the acquisitions I'd orchestrated, the fund performance I'd helped create, remained invisible. The distance between us grew incrementally with each passing year. I rose through the ranks quickly at Horizon Ventures. my analytical skills and strategic thinking placing me on an accelerated path. By 30, I had been promoted to senior investment partner, a position that would have astonished my family, but my discretion and confidentiality agreements meant I carried this achievement silently. Derek, meanwhile, had launched TechNexus, a moderately successful SaaS platform, and considered himself the family success story. At holiday gatherings, he'd lecture me about taking real risks and building something of your own, unaware that I'd personally evaluated hundreds of pitches better than his, and helped guide dozens of companies to valuations that dwarfed his modest success. "You should come to one of our pitch events sometime," he once offered condescendingly. "Might give you some perspective on what real entrepreneurs actually do beyond those spreadsheets you stare at." I had simply smiled and said, "Maybe someday," swallowing the irony that I had personally rejected his company's application for funding at Horizon Ventures the previous year. The pitch had been derivative, the market analysis shallow, and the growth projections unrealistic. But Derek would never know it was his sister who had made that critical call. The final breaking point came 3 years ago during a family dinner when Derek announced his latest product innovation, a collaborative project management platform with integrated AI assistance. As he described the features, my blood ran cold. It was nearly identical to a concept I had shared with him 6 months earlier during a rare moment of professional vulnerability. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "That sounds a lot like my idea," I said quietly, interrupting his enthusiastic explanation. The table fell silent. Derek's expression flickered briefly before he laughed. "Great minds think alike, sis. But ideas are worthless without execution, right, Dad?" Dad nodded approvingly. "Derek's right, Elena. Everyone has ideas. Entrepreneurs are the ones who make them reality." I sat in stunned silence as the conversation moved on, the theft of my intellectual property dismissed as casually as my career had always been. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't confront Derek directly. I wouldn't create a family rift with accusations. Instead, I would play a longer, smarter game. Over the next 3 years, I dedicated myself to building my position and influence at Horizon Ventures. I specialized in SaaS platforms and productivity tools, becoming the firm's leading expert in exactly the market segment where Derek's company operated. I cultivated relationships with larger competitors in the space, always keeping tabs on TechNexus from a distance. Meanwhile, I began secretly developing my own version of the platform, not to launch as a competitor, but to understand every aspect of the business model, to know precisely what Derek's company was worth and what its weaknesses were. By the time the invitation to the Tech Startup of the Year awards ceremony arrived via email, forwarded by Mom with a brief note, "Derek's being honored for his innovation. Family should be there. Dad's giving a speech." I was ready. There was no request for RSVP, just the assumption I would attend as the supportive sister, relegated to the background as the Mitchell men took center stage once again. I stared at the formal invitation emblazoned with the Tech Industry Association's logo. TechNexus had indeed grown impressively over the past 3 years, reaching 8-figure revenues and expanding its team to nearly 100 employees. Derek had done well, I had to admit. Even if he'd launched with my stolen concept, I felt genuine pride in his accomplishment, complicated by the familiar sting of being perpetually overshadowed, and the sharper pain of having my ideas appropriated without acknowledgement. As I contemplated whether to attend, my secure line rang. Few people had this number, and calls on it never brought casual conversation. "Elena, it's Gabrielle." The voice of Horizon Ventures CEO was precise and measured over the phone. "Do you have a moment to discuss Project Homecoming?" "Of course," I responded, sitting straighter in my chair. "I understand your brother's company is being honored next week at the Tech Innovation Summit." I blinked in surprise. "Yes, how did you—" "I'll be attending as a keynote speaker," she explained. "But there's something you should know. The board has approved our acquisition strategy for the productivity tools sector. We're moving forward with the TechNexus acquisition." My heart skipped. Project Homecoming was the codename for our firm's strategy to consolidate smaller players in the productivity space under our management. TechNexus had been on our list of potential acquisitions, but I hadn't expected it to move forward so quickly. The board was particularly impressed with your analysis, Gabrielle continued. Your recommendation to acquire rather than compete was compelling. We're offering 20% above market valuation. They won't refuse. And my role? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You'll oversee the integration and restructuring as the new CEO of the acquired entity. Elena, you'll effectively become your brother's boss. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of my family dismissing my business acumen, I would be taking control of Derek's pride and joy, not out of vengeance, but because it made perfect business sense for our firm. Your family doesn't know about this, do they? Gabrielle asked, though she clearly knew the answer. Confidentiality agreements, I replied simply. They believe I'm still an analyst pushing papers. Her chuckle held understanding. Well, Elena, I believe they're in for quite a surprise. After hanging up, I sat in silence, contemplating the upcoming ceremony with a mix of vindication and apprehension. Part of me wanted to warn Derek to prepare him for the revelation, but another part, the part that had endured years of dismissal and condescension, not to mention the theft of my original concept, wanted to see his unfiltered reaction. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, I prepared methodically, as I did for any business transaction. I reviewed every detail of TechNexus's operations, financials, and team structure. I developed a comprehensive integration plan that would preserve the company's strengths while addressing its weaknesses. And I had a custom suit tailored, not to blend in as the supportive sister, but to command attention as the incoming CEO. The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and clear. I drove to the luxury hotel alone, my stomach tight with anticipation. As I approached the check-in desk, I deliberately presented my standard business card rather than my Horizon Ventures executive credentials. I'm Elena Mitchell, here for the Tech Innovation Awards, I explained. The event coordinator checked her tablet. I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell, I don't see you on the guest list. I'm Derek Mitchell's sister, I clarified. Family of the honoree. She checked again. I have Richard and Catherine Mitchell and Melissa Mitchell listed as family, but no Elena Mitchell. My chest tightened. Either an administrative oversight or, more likely, Derek had simply not included me on the family list. Before I could respond, I spotted my family approaching the check-in desk. Dad in his expensive suit, Mom elegantly dressed, and Derek with his wife Melissa on his arm. The coordinator waved them through with a respectful, "Congratulations, Mr. Mitchell." As they passed, Derek noticed me standing at the desk. Rather than showing concern that his sister was being denied entry, he gave me that familiar smug look, the one that said I was once again failing to measure up to the Mitchell standard. "Problem with your registration, Elena?" He called, not stopping to help. Typical corporate mindset. Always waiting for someone else to solve your problems. They continued inside while I remained at the checkpoint, the coordinator looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside, Ms. Mitchell. We have other guests arriving." For a moment, I considered simply leaving, avoiding the confrontation to come. But I had waited too long, prepared too carefully, to back down now. Just as the coordinator was about to call security, a sleek black town car pulled up to the entrance. Gabrielle Wang, CEO of Horizon Ventures, and one of the most powerful women in the tech investment world, stepped out. "Elena," she called, striding toward me with purpose. "I was looking for you." The coordinator's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "Is there a problem?" Gabrielle asked, her authoritative voice causing several nearby staff to turn. "Ms. Mitchell isn't on our guest list," the coordinator explained hesitantly. Gabrielle raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "That must be an oversight. Ms. Mitchell is not only my guest, but a featured participant in tonight's proceedings." She turned to me with a knowing smile. After all, the new CEO of TechNexus should certainly be present when the company is honored, don't you think? The coordinator's confusion was evident, but Gabrielle's status as keynote speaker brooked no argument. "Of course, Ms. Wang. My apologies, Ms. Mitchell. Please, both of you, right this way." As we entered the grand ballroom, Gabrielle squeezed my arm encouragingly. "Ready to rewrite the family narrative, Elena?" I took a deep breath, scanning the room until I spotted my family seated at a premium table near the stage. I've been ready for years. The ballroom at the Grand Meridian Hotel hummed with conversation as tech industry luminaries, investors, and entrepreneurs mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvre. Gabrielle guided me not to the family section where my parents sat with Derek and Melissa, but to the reserved VIP table in the front row. "Your seat, Ms. Mitchell," she said, loud enough for nearby executives to hear. Several industry leaders nodded respectfully in my direction, some coming over to shake my hand. "Impressive analysis on the productivity space, Elena," murmured the CEO of a major tech company. "Your acquisition strategy is the talk of the industry." From across the room, I felt Derek's confused stare. I could read his expression perfectly, the narrowed eyes, the slightly tilted head. He was trying to reconcile his paper-pushing sister with the woman being treated with deference by some of the most powerful figures in the tech world. Dad leaned over to whisper something to him, probably asking what was happening. Mom simply looked bewildered, her social smile frozen in place as she watched tech leaders twice her husband's net worth treating me like a peer. The ceremony began with the traditional welcome address and industry acknowledgments. As the proceedings got underway, I found myself drifting back to specific moments of dismissal that had shaped our family dynamic. Derek at my MBA graduation. "So basically, you'll be making PowerPoints while real entrepreneurs build things that matter." Dad after my first promotion. "That's nice, honey. Of course, advancement comes easier in corporate jobs. Less innovation required." Mom just last Christmas. "It's such a shame your job keeps you so busy. You're missing your chance to start a family, you know. Biological clocks don't care about careers." Each memory stung afresh, but today they carried a new context. The dismissal had been based on incomplete information, a necessary discretion that had cost me my family's respect, but had served my career in ways they couldn't comprehend. The Industry Association president took the stage to begin the awards presentation. Minor recognitions came first: innovation grants, sustainability awards, and diversity initiatives acknowledged with polite applause. Then came the moment for Derek's recognition. He rose confidently at the announcement of his name, striding to the stage with the assurance of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "Derek Mitchell," announced the association president, "for revolutionary advances in collaborative productivity tools, we recognize TechNexus as Tech Startup of the Year." The citation detailed TechNexus's growth, its innovative approach to AI-assisted project management, and its impact on remote work productivity. It was genuinely impressive performance, worthy of recognition, even if the core concept had originated with me. Derek accepted the award with a practiced humility that nonetheless failed to completely mask his pride. He stepped to the microphone for his acceptance speech. "This honor belongs not just to me, but to the incredible team at TechNexus," he began. "Their dedication and creativity made our platform possible." He thanked his investors, his development team, and then turned to personal acknowledgments. "I want to thank my father, Richard Mitchell, whose entrepreneurial spirit has guided my business journey. Everything I know about taking risks and building something from nothing, I learned from him." Dad beamed from the family section, chest puffed with pride. "To my mother, Catherine, whose unwavering support gave me the confidence to pursue my dreams." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "And to my wife Melissa, whose patience during late nights and working weekends made this all possible." His wife smiled adoringly from her seat beside my parents. I waited for my name, for some acknowledgement of his sister, who had actually conceived the core product idea. But Derek concluded his speech without a single mention of me, not even the cursory "and to my sister" that basic family courtesy might have demanded. It shouldn't have hurt after all these years of distance. But somehow the public omission cut deeper than our private estrangement ever had. Derek returned to his seat to enthusiastic applause, accepting congratulatory handshakes as he passed. He didn't look in my direction once. As the applause died down, Gabrielle Wang took the stage. Her presence commanded immediate attention, the room falling into respectful silence. "Before we move to my keynote address," she said, her voice filling the ballroom, "I have an important announcement about the future of one of tonight's honorees." The audience straightened in their seats, sensing something significant was coming. Few among us succeed in the tech industry without partnerships and strategic alignments. Gabrielle continued. Today marks a new chapter for TechNexus, one that will take its innovative platform to global scale. I felt my heart begin to race as Gabrielle's gaze found me in the audience. I'm pleased to announce that Horizon Ventures has acquired TechNexus in a deal finalized this morning. This acquisition represents our firm's confidence in the platform's potential and our commitment to scaling its impact worldwide. From the corner of my eye, I could see my family's confusion transform into shock as Derek half rose from his seat. "What?" I heard him whisper loudly to my father as Gabrielle continued. "As with any acquisition, leadership transitions are critical to success." Gabrielle's voice rose with formal gravity. "It is my distinct honor to introduce the executive who identified this opportunity, structured the acquisition, and will now lead TechNexus into its next phase of growth." She paused, her eyes moving deliberately to my family. "Please welcome to the stage the new Chief Executive Officer of TechNexus, Elena Mitchell." The audience's reaction was immediate and electric. Tech industry leaders throughout the room stood, creating a cascading standing ovation that rippled from the front row to the back of the hall. These were people who recognized the significance of Horizon Ventures' move, and who understood exactly what my role in it represented. Only my family remained seated, frozen in shock as I walked toward the stage. My steps were measured and deliberate, the walk of someone accustomed to closing eight-figure deals. I felt Derek's eyes following me, his expression cycling rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching horror, as the reality of what was happening began to sink in. Gabrielle waited at center stage, her smile knowing and satisfied. As I climbed the steps to stand beside her, the applause continued unabated. "Elena Mitchell," Gabrielle began once the audience finally quieted, "has served as Horizon Ventures' senior investment partner for the past 3 years, identifying opportunities that have generated over $2 billion in returns for our portfolio." I stood composed despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. From this vantage point, I could see my family clearly. Dad's mouth slightly open, Mom clutching her purse with white knuckles, Derek's face flushed with color. For security and strategic reasons, much of Ms. Mitchell's work has remained confidential, Gabrielle continued. But today we can acknowledge her role as the architect of our productivity sector acquisition strategy, a comprehensive market consolidation that begins with TechNexus, but will expand to create a unified platform ecosystem. As Gabrielle spoke, my mind flashed back to the reality behind those sanitized words. 3 years of meticulous market analysis, sleepless nights evaluating competing technologies, the constant weight of knowing that billions in investment capital followed my recommendations. The isolation of my position, magnified by the confidentiality that prevented me from sharing my professional reality with anyone outside the firm. Ms. Mitchell personally structured this acquisition, recognizing TechNexus's potential while identifying key areas for strategic enhancement. Her integration plan will preserve the company's innovative core while expanding its market reach exponentially. What Gabrielle couldn't say was that I had been the one to reject TechNexus's initial funding application to Horizon, not out of spite or vengeance for Derek's theft of my idea, but because the business wasn't ready. Instead, I had tracked its development, waiting for precisely the right moment when acquisition would benefit both the company and our portfolio. Her strategic vision directly influenced 7 of our most successful investments in the past year, with a combined valuation increase of 340%. In the audience, my father's expression had transformed from shock to something more complex, a dawning recognition tinged with what looked like shame. Beside him, my mother had begun to cry silently, one hand covering her mouth. Derek simply stared, the color now drained from his face. For extraordinary business acumen and strategic leadership, Gabrielle's voice resonated through the hushed ballroom. Horizon Ventures is proud to appoint Elena Mitchell as Chief Executive Officer of TechNexus, effective immediately. She handed me a symbolic blue folder containing the acquisition documents, already executed and binding. As I accepted it, joining the exclusive club of women CEOs in the tech sector, she spoke more quietly just for me. "Well-deserved and long overdue, Elena." I stepped to the microphone, aware that every eye in the room was on me, none more intense than those of my family. "Thank you, Gabrielle." My voice remained steady, professional. "This acquisition represents not just my vision, but the collective insight of everyone at Horizon Ventures who recognized TechNexus's potential in the collaborative workspace." I deliberately did not look at my family as I continued. In venture capital and strategic investment, we understand that recognition is rarely immediate. Our greatest insights often develop over years, our contributions sometimes hidden until the moment is right for revelation. Now I allowed myself to meet Derek's gaze briefly, but we persist nonetheless, analyzing markets, identifying opportunities, and creating value, whether or not others recognize the process behind the outcomes. As I concluded my brief remarks, the audience rose once again in applause. This time I noticed my father standing slowly, pulling my mother to her feet beside him. Derek remained seated, his expression unreadable. Gabrielle returned to the microphone to continue with her keynote address, but my focus had narrowed to the inevitable confrontation that would follow. After years of dismissal and misunderstanding, my family was finally seeing me not as they had imagined me, but as I truly was. Their world had just shifted dramatically, and I knew from experience that sudden paradigm shifts rarely occurred without resistance. As Gabrielle's keynote concluded and people began to file out for the networking reception, industry leaders approached to offer congratulations. Each handshake and business card exchange created a larger buffer between me and my family, delaying the inevitable moment when we would have to face each other with this new reality between us. Through the crowd, I could see Derek still seated, staring at the now empty stage, while my parents stood awkwardly nearby, clearly unsure whether to approach me as I was surrounded by CEOs and investors. The public revelation was complete, but the real reckoning was yet to come. Growing up as Elena Mitchell meant living with constant comparisons. Our family home in suburban Boston was a shrine to entrepreneurial success, with Dad's business magazine covers framed in the hallway and deal mementos displayed in glass cases. From my earliest memories, business wasn't just what my father did, it was who our family was. Mitchell entrepreneurs don't just participate in markets, Dad would say at dinner. We transform them. This wasn't just fatherly encouragement, it was our family doctrine. My childhood was filled with business lessons, disguised as family activities. Board games weren't just entertainment, they were opportunities for Dad to teach negotiation tactics. Family vacations included tours of companies and meetings with business associates. Even our allowances came with lessons on investment and compound interest. Derek thrived in this environment. He launched his first business at 7, a lemonade stand that he quickly franchised to neighborhood kids, taking a percentage of their sales. By 12, he was building and selling custom computers to classmates. At 16, he developed a primitive app for local restaurant recommendations that got written up in the regional business journal. Each venture, no matter how small, was celebrated as evidence that the Mitchell entrepreneurial gene had successfully transferred to the next generation, at least to Derek. My approach was different. Where Derek saw opportunities for quick ventures, I saw systems and patterns. I was the child asking questions about business sustainability, employee satisfaction, and long-term market dynamics. While Derek was selling lemonade, I was calculating optimal pricing strategies and customer retention rates. This analytical mindset earned me academic success but little recognition at home. My straight A's and academic awards were acknowledged with quick nods, while Derek's $50 profit on a weekend venture warranted celebratory dinners. Books and theories are fine, Elena, Dad would say, but real business happens in the real world. Mom, who had given up her own career in marketing to support Dad's entrepreneurial journey, tried to bridge the gap. Elena just has a different approach, Richard. Not everyone has to be a founder. But her defense always carried an undertone of lowered expectations, as if she was asking Dad to accept that I simply wasn't capable of the Mitchell family's traditional path to success. The summer before college crystallized our family dynamic perfectly. I had been accepted to Harvard with a partial scholarship, an achievement that received a perfunctory good job from Dad. That same month, Derek announced he was creating a social media platform for high school entrepreneurs. Dad immediately invested $10,000 and spent every evening and weekend helping Derek develop his business plan. The platform ultimately failed after 3 months, but Dad framed the experience as valuable learning for Derek. Meanwhile, my request for guidance on college internships was met with, "Just focus on your classes, Elena. Corporate recruiters like good grades." By the time I entered Harvard Business School for my MBA, after graduating summa cum laude from my undergraduate program, the pattern was set. Derek was the risk taker, the innovator, the true Mitchell entrepreneur. I was the cautious one, the academic, the one who needed the safety net of corporate employment. What my family never understood was that my seeming caution masked a different kind of ambition. I wasn't avoiding risk. I was calculating it precisely. I wasn't rejecting entrepreneurship. I was studying it from every angle, preparing to enter the game with advantages my brother and father never considered. My internship at Horizon Ventures wasn't the safe corporate choice my family assumed. It was a strategic position at one of the most aggressive venture capital firms in the industry, a place where I could see hundreds of businesses from the inside, learning from both successes and failures without betting my own limited capital on a single venture. Each year at Horizon taught me lessons that would have taken a decade to learn as a founder. I saw brilliant ideas fail due to poor execution. I watched mediocre concepts soar through perfect timing and marketing. I learned to recognize patterns invisible to most entrepreneurs caught in their own vision. And I was good at it, exceptionally good. By my second year, I had identified 3 investments that grew to 10 times their initial valuation. By year 3, senior partners were asking for my analysis before making final decisions. My methodology for evaluating SaaS companies became the firm's standard protocol. But confidentiality agreements and strategic considerations meant I couldn't share these accomplishments with my family. At home, I remained Elena the cautious, Elena the corporate, Elena who needed the security of a regular paycheck. The family dynamics were particularly painful during holidays and family gatherings. These occasions became showcases for Derek's latest ventures, with Dad playing the role of proud mentor and Mom ensuring everyone had enough food while making pointed comments about my personal life. Elena's very focused on her career right now, she would tell relatives who asked about my relationship status, as if my professional choices were an unfortunate phase delaying my real purpose of marriage and family. Derek, for his part, grew increasingly condescending as his ventures gained traction. After launching his 3rd startup, the one before TechNexus, he developed a habit of explaining basic business concepts to me at family dinners. "The thing about fundraising, Elena," he'd say, swirling his wine glass, "is that you have to create FOMO among investors. But I guess in the corporate world, you don't have to worry about that." I would smile tightly and change the subject, swallowing the irony that I had just that week led Horizon's investment committee through a strategic analysis that deployed $50 million across emerging technologies, more capital than Derek had raised in his entire career. Dad would beam at Derek during these explanations, occasionally adding his own entrepreneurial wisdom, both of them operating under the assumption that I needed education in the basics of business, despite my Harvard MBA and position at one of the country's premier venture capital firms. "You know, Elena," Dad said during one particularly difficult Thanksgiving, "there's always a place for you at Mitchell Solutions if you ever want to leave the corporate treadmill and do something more meaningful." The offer was well-intentioned but revealed how fundamentally he misunderstood my career. In his mind, I was simply processing paperwork for other people's money, not shaping investment strategies that would create the next generation of business leaders. "Thanks, Dad," I replied, "but I'm learning a lot where I am." "Learning is great," Derek interjected, "but at some point you have to actually build something of your own." Mom nodded in agreement. "It would be nice to see you passionate about something, Elena. You used to have such creative ideas when you were younger." That comment stung particularly because it was true. I had always had innovative ideas I'd learned to keep to myself after years of having them dismissed or overshadowed by Derek's more flashy, but less substantive concepts. What none of them knew was that I was already building something, a comprehensive understanding of market dynamics and investment patterns that would eventually allow me to make moves beyond anything they could imagine. While they saw me as risk-averse, I was actually playing a longer, more sophisticated game. The conversation about my safe career continued until Derek launched into a description of his newest project, a revolutionary platform for remote team collaboration that he claimed would transform productivity for distributed workforces. As he described the features and market positioning, I felt a growing sense of déjà vu. The concept sounded remarkably familiar, because it was mine. 6 months earlier, during a rare moment of professional vulnerability, I had shared my thoughts on the future of remote work platforms with Derek. We had been alone on the deck at our parents' vacation home, slightly tipsy from Dad's expensive scotch, and I had let down my guard. The problem with current collaboration tools, I had explained, is that they're designed around documents or communications, not around actual workflow patterns. What's needed is an AI-assisted platform that adapts to how teams naturally collaborate, with predictive workflow management and contextual resource allocation. I had even sketched out the basic architecture on a napkin, excited to share my insights with someone outside of work, someone I naively thought might finally see my business acumen. Derek had seemed interested, but dismissive. Sounds complicated. Most teams just need better chat and file sharing. Yet here he was, 6 months later, presenting my exact concept as his own revolutionary idea, right down to the predictive workflow management I had specifically highlighted. That sounds exactly like what I described to you last summer, I said, interrupting his enthusiastic explanation. The table fell silent. Derek's expression flickered briefly, a momentary tell that confirmed my suspicion, before he laughed dismissively. Great minds think alike, sis. But ideas are worthless without execution, right, Dad? Dad nodded approvingly. Derek's right, Elena. Everyone has ideas. Entrepreneurs are the ones who make them reality. I sat in stunned silence as the conversation moved on, the theft of my intellectual property dismissed as casually as my career had always been. Mom briefly patted my hand before asking Derek more questions about his funding strategy, the family's attention completely redirected to the true entrepreneur at the table. That night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life and career. I wouldn't confront Derek directly. That would only reinforce the family narrative of Elena the emotional, Elena the envious of her brother's success. I wouldn't create a family rift with accusations that would be dismissed as sour grapes. Instead, I would channel my hurt and anger into strategic patience. I would watch Derek's company closely, tracking its development while accelerating my own career advancement. I would position myself at the intersection of power and opportunity, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what was mine. The next morning, I returned to my apartment in Boston and made 3 commitments to myself. First, I would become indispensable to Horizon Ventures, positioning myself for decision-making authority over investments in Derek's market sector. Second, I would maintain my family relationships exactly as they were, giving no indication of my wounded pride or strategic intentions. Third, I would prepare myself professionally and emotionally for the moment when our paths would inevitably cross in the business world, not as sister and brother, but as strategic opponents. Over the next 3 years, I executed this plan with methodical precision. I specialized in productivity software and remote collaboration tools, becoming Horizon's recognized expert in exactly the space where Derek's stolen concept was developing. I tracked TechNexus's progress through industry reports and financial filings, analyzing its strengths and weaknesses with clinical detachment. At family gatherings, I maintained my role as the supportive sister, listening to Derek's increasingly grand pronouncements about TechNexus's growth with practiced interest. When he boasted about securing $5 million in Series A funding, I congratulated him warmly, never mentioning that I had just directed a $50 million investment in a competing technology. When he complained about the challenges of scaling customer support, I offered sympathetic noises rather than the operational solutions I had seen work across dozens of similar companies in our portfolio. You'll figure it out, I would say with an encouraging smile. You always do. What I never said was, your customer acquisition cost is unsustainable. Your tech stack won't scale beyond 50,000 users. Your UX needs a complete overhaul. All insights I could have shared. All problems I had seen solved in other companies. All expertise I kept to myself as I watched him struggle with challenges I could have helped him navigate. Was it petty? Perhaps. Was it strategic? Absolutely. By positioning myself as the supportive but less business-savvy sister, I maintained perfect visibility into TechNexus's development, while Derek saw me as no competitive threat whatsoever. He would casually mention major platform issues at Sunday dinners, never realizing he was providing valuable intelligence to someone who was becoming increasingly influential in his market space. Meanwhile, at Horizon Ventures, I was methodically increasing my authority. My investment recommendations consistently outperformed projections, earning me rapid promotion from analyst to associate to principal to senior investment partner in just 3 years, a trajectory that broke company records. I developed Horizon's comprehensive strategy for the productivity and collaboration space, positioning us to make strategic acquisitions just as the market was beginning to consolidate. Every move I made professionally was calculated not just for maximum return to our portfolio, but to position me perfectly for the moment TechNexus reached its optimal acquisition point. That moment came sooner than even I had anticipated. TechNexus grew rapidly, but Derek's inexperience with scaling operations created vulnerabilities. The company's burn rate accelerated as it added features and staff without corresponding revenue growth. Derek had built a solid product with growing market adoption, but the financial fundamentals were showing classic signs of pre-collapse stress. You don't have to choose between protecting yourself and having compassion, he reminded me during a particularly difficult period when my father's health declined further. The strongest boundaries are the ones flexible enough to accommodate human frailty without compromising your core values. 3 years into our marriage, we welcomed Thea, named for my grandfather but blazing her own trail from her first breath. At 3, she already shows the determined independence that characterized both her namesake and her mother, coupled with her father's thoughtful observation of the world around her. Last month brought perhaps the most meaningful development in our ongoing family story. My father, his health stabilized but permanently affected by the stroke, asked to meet with me privately. Though our relationship had thawed somewhat through his medical crisis, we had never directly addressed the events that fractured our family 5 years ago. I arrived at my parents' condo with the cautious optimism that experience had taught me, open to possibility, but protected by clear internal boundaries. My father sat in his wheelchair by the window, a journal open on the lap desk attached to his chair. His speech had improved with therapy but remained deliberate, each word carefully formed. "I've been writing," he said, gesturing to the journal. "Since speaking is difficult, want you to read." I accepted the journal, moving to the sofa to give his words the attention they deserved. Inside, in painstaking handwriting that revealed the effort behind each letter, I found a detailed accounting, not of money or assets, but of regrets. Page after page documented moments when his pride had overshadowed his integrity, when financial pressures had compromised his values, when fear of failure had driven him to desperate measures. He wrote of watching his own father struggle financially and vowing never to experience the same vulnerability, creating a lifelong pattern of prioritizing financial security above all else. Traded real wealth for illusion of control. One particularly poignant passage read, "Lost daughter's respect, seeking external validation. Greatest failure, not financial but moral." The raw honesty of his self-assessment moved me more than any direct apology could have. This wasn't a strategic attempt to regain favor, but a genuine reckoning with the choices that had shaped his life and damaged our family. When I finished reading, I returned the journal to him, noticing the tension in his body as he awaited my response. "Thank you for sharing this," I said simply. "It helps me understand." "Not excuse," he clarified, his limited words carrying the weight of conviction. "Explanation only." "I know the difference," I assured him, "and I appreciate you making the distinction." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of unspoken history between us gradually shifting into something less oppressive. Not erased, never that, but perhaps rearranged into a configuration that allowed for breath and movement, where there had been only constriction before. "Thea," he said finally. "She has his eyes." The observation, so unexpected and yet so accurate, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. My daughter did indeed have Grandpa Thomas's thoughtful gaze, the same way of looking at the world as if trying to understand its underlying patterns. "She does," I agreed. "And his determination." A ghost of a smile crossed my father's face. Chen women, unstoppable. It wasn't reconciliation in any conventional sense. Too much had happened for simple forgiveness narratives or sentimental family reunions. But it was acknowledgement of truth, of harm caused, and of the resilience that had allowed me to build a life of integrity despite the models I'd been given. As I drive home from my parents' condo, windows down to enjoy the desert evening air, I reflect on the long, circuitous path that led to this moment of qualified peace. The inheritance I fought so hard to reclaim has been transformed from properties and bank accounts into something more essential and enduring. The commercial buildings Grandpa left me now house not just my law practice and Melissa's business, but a nonprofit foundation we established together, the Thomas Chen Legacy Project, providing legal and financial education to young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds. The wedding fund, finally restored to its intended purpose, ultimately helped create not just a celebration but a true partnership with Ethan, built on mutual respect and shared values. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. When would be the place, Dad? Derek shrugged off the hand. When she's finished gutting my team? When she's rebranded everything I built? When she's erased every trace of my contribution? Mom stepped forward, her eyes red-rimmed. Elena, how could you not tell us? We're your family. I took a deep breath, acutely aware of the attention we were beginning to draw. Several industry journalists had noticed the confrontation, and the last thing Horizon needed was negative press around the acquisition. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, I suggested quietly. Why? Derek challenged. Corporate takeovers seem to be your specialty. Why change the venue now? Before I could respond, Gabrielle appeared at my side, her presence immediately altering the dynamic. Mr. Mitchell, she addressed Derek with quiet authority. I believe your sister suggested a private venue for family discussions. That seems appropriate, doesn't it? Derek straightened reflexively at the CEO's tone. Yes, of course. Gabrielle gestured to a small meeting room off the main reception area. You're welcome to use the maple room, Elena. Take whatever time you need. I nodded gratefully. Thank you, Gabrielle. As my family followed me to the meeting room, I could feel the tension radiating from Derek. Once inside with the door closed, he wasted no time. 3 years, Elena. 3 years of smiling at family dinners, asking about the company, offering encouragement, all while you were what? Plotting to swoop in and steal everything I built? I didn't steal anything, Derek, I replied, emphasizing the word steal pointedly. Horizon made a fair market acquisition of TechNexus. Your investors received a 20% premium. Your shareholders are celebrating right now. This isn't about the deal terms. His voice rose. It's about you secretly positioning yourself to take over my company without even a courtesy heads up. That's not business. That's betrayal. Dad stepped forward, his expression a complex mixture of confusion and calculation. Elena, help us understand. All these years, we thought that I couldn't measure up? I finished for him, the words emerging more sharply than I'd intended. That I was playing it safe in the corporate world while Derek was the real entrepreneur? You both made that perfectly clear from the moment I chose Horizon over launching my own startup. That's not fair, Mom protested weakly. Isn't it? I looked at each of them in turn. Dad, you called my career choice hiding in the corporate world when I joined Horizon. Derek, you spent years making condescending remarks about how I was just analyzing while real entrepreneurs like you were building things. Mom, you've treated my career as an unfortunate obstacle to marriage and children. The stark truth hung in the air between us. We didn't know, Dad said finally. You didn't need to know the details of my position at Horizon to respect my career choice, I replied. You assumed that because I wasn't founding companies like the Mitchell men, my contribution was somehow lesser. Derek paced the small meeting room, his award catching the light with each turn. So all those times I was telling you about TechNexus's challenges, our funding rounds, our product roadmap, you were what, gathering intelligence for this moment? That's not how I thought about it, Derek. Then how did you think about it? He demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were content to let your family believe you were just another corporate drone, while you built the leverage to take over my company. I followed standard confidentiality protocols, I said, my business training keeping my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. Every investment strategy I developed, every acquisition I evaluated was subject to strict non-disclosure requirements. Discussing my work specifics, even in general terms, could have compromised Horizon's market position and violated my professional obligations. We're your family, Derek's voice rose again, not some competing venture firm. Business ethics doesn't make exceptions for family, I countered. You know that, Derek. Or would you have shared TechNexus's confidential financials and strategic weaknesses with Mom and Dad? He fell silent, knowing I was right. Dad sank heavily into one of the conference room chairs, looking suddenly older. All these years, we thought you were stuck in some middle management position. I even made calls, tried to get you introductions to startup accelerators, thinking you needed help breaking out of the corporate world. The irony of that statement might have been amusing under different circumstances. My father, the regional tech entrepreneur, believing his Harvard-educated daughter needed his connections to advance in her career when she had been directing investments larger than his company's entire valuation. I appreciate the intention, Dad, even if it wasn't necessary. Mom wiped at her eyes. But why let us believe you were less successful than you are? You could have at least told us about your promotions, your position. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. Or would you still have seen me as choosing the wrong path? The path that wasn't really entrepreneurial in your eyes? My question struck home. The uncomfortable silence that followed confirmed what I had always suspected, that even knowing my title and influence, they would have considered venture capital somehow lesser than founding a company, regardless of the relative impact or success. Derek broke the silence, his voice lower but still tense. And TechNexus? Was this acquisition your endgame all along? Were you tracking us from the beginning? I met his gaze directly. You mean from the moment you took my collaborative workflow concept and presented it as your own at that family dinner 3 years ago? Yes, Derek. From exactly that moment. The color drained from his face. That's what this is about? An idea we casually discussed once? An architecture I designed completely and sketched out for you in detail. I corrected. An innovation you dismissed as too complicated until you presented it as your revolutionary concept 6 months later. Dad looked between us, confusion evident. What idea? The core technology that made TechNexus valuable, I explained without breaking eye contact with Derek. The predictive workflow management system that your son claimed to have invented. I designed it. I shared it with him in confidence. He built a company on it without acknowledgement or compensation. Is this true? Dad asked Derek. Derek's expression hardened defensively. We had a conversation once where Elena mentioned some general concepts about workflow management. Nothing proprietary, nothing detailed. I developed those vague ideas into actual technology. I have the original napkin, I said quietly, with the architecture diagram, dated and witnessed by the bartender at the Cape House, who I stayed in touch with. I also have the email I sent myself that night documenting the conversation, standard practice in venture capital when sharing potentially valuable concepts. Derek's confident facade cracked slightly. You wouldn't have done anything with it anyway. You were too risk-averse to actually build something. You're right that I wouldn't have founded a company around it, I acknowledged, but not because I was afraid. Because I was playing a different, longer game, one with potentially much larger impact than a single startup. Dad was looking at me differently now, reassessing decades of assumptions in real time. So this acquisition, it wasn't just business for Horizon, it was personal for you. The acquisition was justified entirely on business merits, I said firmly. TechNexus is a valuable addition to Horizon's portfolio, with significant growth potential under the right leadership. The fact that it also happens to return control of my intellectual property to me is a secondary benefit. And my role in all this? Derek asked, the anger in his voice now tinged with apprehension. Am I being fired from my own company? I'd prepared for this question, knowing it would inevitably arise. That depends on you, Derek. The acquisition agreement includes a 6-month transition period, during which your role will be executive advisor reporting directly to me. After that period, we'll evaluate next steps based on performance and cultural fit. Cultural fit? He repeated incredulously. In my own company? In Horizon's company, I corrected gently. TechNexus is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Horizon Ventures, and I am its CEO. How we move forward from here, professionally, is entirely dependent on your ability to adapt to that new reality. Derek stared at me, struggling visibly with the complete reversal of our power dynamic. And if I refuse? If I walk away? Then you activate the golden parachute clause in the acquisition agreement. 6 months' salary as severance, acceleration of your remaining shares, and a 2-year non-compete in the productivity space. I delivered these terms with the calm precision I'd used in dozens of similar negotiations, though never with my own brother. You've thought of everything, he said bitterly. That's literally my job, I replied. Anticipating contingencies and structuring optimal outcomes is what venture capitalists do. It's why Horizon pays me very well and gives me significant authority over our portfolio strategy. Mom, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. I don't understand why it had to be this way. Why you couldn't have just confronted Derek about the idea when he first used it? Why let it go this far? It was a fair question. One I'd asked myself many times over the past 3 years. Would you have believed me? I asked her directly. If I had accused your entrepreneur son of stealing an idea from your corporate daughter, whose side would you have taken? Her silence was answer enough. I needed to address the situation from a position of undeniable strength, I continued more gently. Not as Derek's overlooked sister making accusations, but as a respected industry leader making business decisions. And that required patience. Dad was studying me with new eyes, seeing not his dutiful daughter but a strategic thinker who had orchestrated a complex years-long plan culminating in this precise moment. I recognized the expression. It was the same look he gave to entrepreneurs he truly respected. You played the long game, he said, something like admiration creeping into his voice. While we all thought you were just processing paperwork, you were actually positioning yourself for this exact scenario. I was doing considerably more than processing paperwork, Dad. I couldn't help but point out. I was helping build one of the most successful venture funds in the country while developing expertise that would eventually put me in this room, having this conversation. Derek had stopped pacing and sunk into a chair, the full reality of his situation finally sinking in. So what happens now to the company, to the team? TechNexus continues operations with minimal disruption, I explained. We retain the core development team, integrate your sales function with our existing channels, and accelerate product development with additional resources. The company name and brand remain for the immediate future, with potential consolidation under the Horizon Productivity Suite in year 2. I was speaking now as CEO, not as sister, outlining the business strategy with clarity and confidence. And us? Derek gestured between us. What happens to us as a family? The question hung in the air, shifting the conversation from business strategy back to personal territory. For all my preparation, this was the aspect I'd given the least thought to. Not because it mattered less, but because it mattered too much to reduce to strategic planning. That depends on all of us, I said finally. I've achieved the professional outcome I wanted. What happens to our family relationships is a separate question, one that requires effort from everyone in this room. Dad stood up, straightening his jacket in the gesture I recognized from whenever he was preparing to make a difficult business decision. Elena is right, he said with unexpected firmness. We, your mother and I, have done both of you a disservice. We elevated one child's entrepreneurial path while dismissing another's corporate journey, never considering that both might represent valid forms of business success. This acknowledgement, so long overdue, hit me with unexpected force. I had prepared for anger, defensiveness, even accusations, but not for my father's honest self-reflection. Richard, Mom began, but he held up his hand. No, Catherine, this needs to be said. We created a family culture where one type of business success was celebrated, while another was tolerated at best. Is it any surprise our children ended up in this situation? Derek looked up sharply. Are you saying this is your fault? Elena orchestrated a hostile takeover of my company. It wasn't hostile, I corrected automatically. The board and investors unanimously approved the acquisition. That's the definition of friendly. Not from where I'm sitting, Derek muttered. Dad fixed him with a stern look. Did you take Elena's idea without acknowledgement? Derek's silence was damning. Then perhaps, Dad continued, this outcome, while extreme, isn't entirely undeserved. Anticipating contingencies and structuring optimal outcomes is what venture capitalists do. It's why Horizon pays me very well and gives me significant authority over our portfolio strategy. Mom, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. I don't understand why it had to be this way. Why you couldn't have just confronted Derek about the idea when he first used it. Why let it go this far? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself many times over the past 3 years. Would you have believed me? I asked her directly. If I had accused your entrepreneur son of stealing an idea from your corporate daughter, whose side would you have taken? Her silence was answer enough. I needed to address the situation from a position of undeniable strength, I continued more gently. Not as Derek's overlooked sister making accusations, but as a respected industry leader making business decisions. And that required patience. Dad was studying me with new eyes, seeing not his dutiful daughter but a strategic thinker who had orchestrated a complex years-long plan culminating in this precise moment. I recognized the expression. It was the same look he gave to entrepreneurs he truly respected. You played the long game, he said, something like admiration creeping into his voice. While we all thought you were just processing paperwork, you were actually positioning yourself for this exact scenario. I was doing considerably more than processing paperwork, Dad. I couldn't help but point out. I was helping build one of the most successful venture funds in the country, while developing expertise that would eventually put me in this room, having this conversation. Derek had stopped pacing and sunk into a chair, the full reality of his situation finally sinking in. So what happens now? To the company? To the team? TechNexus continues operations with minimal disruption, I explained. We retain the core development team, integrate your sales function with our existing channels, and accelerate product development with additional resources. The company name and brand remain for the immediate future, with potential consolidation under the Horizon Productivity Suite in year 2. I was speaking now as CEO, not as sister, outlining the business strategy with clarity and confidence. And us? Derek gestured between us. What happens to us as a family? The question hung in the air, shifting the conversation from business strategy back to personal territory. For all my preparation, this was the aspect I'd given the least thought to. Not because it mattered less, but because it mattered too much to reduce to strategic planning. That depends on all of us, I said finally. I've achieved the professional outcome I wanted. What happens to our family relationships is a separate question, one that requires effort from everyone in this room. Dad stood up, straightening his jacket in the gesture I recognized from whenever he was preparing to make a difficult business decision. Elena is right, he said with unexpected firmness. We, your mother and I, have done both of you a disservice. We elevated one child's entrepreneurial path while dismissing another's corporate journey, never considering that both might represent valid forms of business success. This acknowledgement, so long overdue, hit me with unexpected force. I had prepared for anger, defensiveness, even accusations, but not for my father's honest self-reflection. Richard, Mom began, but he held up his hand. No, Catherine, this needs to be said. We created a family culture where one type of business success was celebrated while another was tolerated at best. Is it any surprise our children ended up in this situation? Derek looked up sharply. Are you saying this is your fault? Elena orchestrated a hostile takeover of my company? It wasn't hostile, I corrected automatically. The board and investors unanimously approved the acquisition. That's the definition of friendly. Not from where I'm sitting, Derek muttered. Dad fixed him with a stern look. Did you take Elena's idea without acknowledgement? Derek's silence was damning. Then perhaps, Dad continued, this outcome, while extreme, isn't entirely undeserved. I want to thank my father, Richard Mitchell, whose entrepreneurial spirit has guided my business journey. Everything I know about taking risks and building something from nothing, I learned from him. Dad beamed from the family section, chest puffed with pride. To my mother, Catherine, whose unwavering support gave me the confidence to pursue my dreams. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. And to my wife, Melissa, whose patience during late nights and working weekends made this all possible. His wife smiled adoringly from her seat beside my parents. I waited for my name, for some acknowledgement of his sister, who had actually conceived the core product idea. But Derek concluded his speech without a single mention of me, not even the cursory "and to my sister" that basic family courtesy might have demanded. It shouldn't have hurt after all these years of distance, but somehow the public omission cut deeper than our private estrangement ever had. Derek returned to his seat to enthusiastic applause, accepting congratulatory handshakes as he passed. He didn't look in my direction once. As the applause died down, Gabrielle Wang took the stage. Her presence commanded immediate attention, the room falling into respectful silence. "Before we move to my keynote address," she said, her voice filling the ballroom, "I have an important announcement about the future of one of tonight's honorees." The audience straightened in their seats, sensing something significant was coming. Few among us succeed in the tech industry without partnerships and strategic alignments. Gabrielle continued. Today marks a new chapter for TechNexus, one that will take its innovative platform to global scale. I felt my heart begin to race as Gabrielle's gaze found me in the audience. I'm pleased to announce that Horizon Ventures has acquired TechNexus in a deal finalized this morning. This acquisition represents our firm's confidence in the platform's potential and our commitment to scaling its impact worldwide. From the corner of my eye, I could see my family's confusion transform into shock as Derek half rose from his seat. "What?" I heard him whisper loudly to my father as Gabrielle continued. "As with any acquisition, leadership transitions are critical to success." Gabrielle's voice rose with formal gravity. "It is my distinct honor to introduce the executive who identified this opportunity, structured the acquisition, and will now lead TechNexus into its next phase of growth." She paused, her eyes moving deliberately to my family. "Please welcome to the stage the new Chief Executive Officer of TechNexus, Elena Mitchell." The audience's reaction was immediate and electric. Tech industry leaders throughout the room stood, creating a cascading standing ovation that rippled from the front row to the back of the hall. These were people who recognized the significance of Horizon Ventures' move, and who understood exactly what my role in it represented. Only my family remained seated, frozen in shock as I walked toward the stage. My steps were measured and deliberate, the walk of someone accustomed to closing eight-figure deals. I felt Derek's eyes following me, his expression cycling rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching horror, as the reality of what was happening began to sink in. Gabrielle waited at center stage, her smile knowing and satisfied. As I climbed the steps to stand beside her, the applause continued unabated. "Elena Mitchell," Gabrielle began once the audience finally quieted, "has served as Horizon Ventures' senior investment partner for the past 3 years, identifying opportunities that have generated over $2 billion in returns for our portfolio." I stood composed despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. From this vantage point, I could see my family clearly. Dad's mouth slightly open, Mom clutching her purse with white knuckles, Derek's face flushed with color. For security and strategic reasons, much of Ms. Mitchell's work has remained confidential, Gabrielle continued. But today we can acknowledge her role as the architect of our productivity sector acquisition strategy, a comprehensive market consolidation that begins with TechNexus, but will expand to create a unified platform ecosystem. As Gabrielle spoke, my mind flashed back to the reality behind those sanitized words. 3 years of meticulous market analysis, sleepless nights evaluating competing technologies, the constant weight of knowing that billions in investment capital followed my recommendations. This unexpected support from my father, the man who had been Derek's unwavering champion throughout our lives, momentarily left me speechless. "What matters now," Dad continued, "is how we move forward, as business associates and as family. Derek, you have a decision to make about your professional future with TechNexus. Elena has given you options, which is more consideration than many acquired founders receive. And all of us have work to do in rebuilding family relationships that have clearly been damaged by years of misunderstanding and unequal treatment." His assessment was remarkably clear-eyed, the businessman in him recognizing the situation for what it was, rather than what he might wish it to be. Mom reached for my hand across the table. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Elena. I just wish we could have celebrated your successes along the way, instead of learning about them all at once like this. Her words were sincere, but they carried the weight of years of missed opportunities. All the promotions, deals, and achievements that should have been acknowledged with family dinners and proud phone calls. There's time for that now, I said, squeezing her hand briefly before releasing it. If we choose to make it. Derek had been silent, processing everything. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its defensive edge. I need some time, he said quietly, to think about the transition role, about everything. This is a lot to process. I nodded. Take the weekend. We have a preliminary integration meeting scheduled for Tuesday morning. Your presence would be valuable, but it's not required. He stood, picking up the award he'd placed on the table. Congratulations on your acquisition, Elena. You've clearly earned it. The words were professional, devoid of warmth, but also of hostility. A starting point, perhaps, for whatever relationship might follow. As he moved toward the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I didn't think you'd ever do anything with that workflow concept. I convinced myself I was doing the idea justice by actually building it. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. The apology, however qualified, was more than I had expected. Thank you for acknowledging that, I replied simply. After Derek left, Mom and Dad exchanged a look loaded with unspoken communication, the kind that comes from decades of partnership. We should go too, Dad said. You have a reception full of industry leaders waiting to speak with the new CEO of TechNexus. He extended his hand formally. Congratulations, Elena. Not just on the acquisition, but on everything you've built at Horizon that we never properly recognized. I shook his hand. This simple professional courtesy, somehow more meaningful than 1,000 family dinners. Thank you, Dad. We'd like to hear about it, Mom added. All of it. Your work, your accomplishments, everything we missed while we were looking the wrong way. I'd like that, I said. But it will take time, for all of us, to adjust to this new reality. As they prepared to leave, Dad turned back. One question, if you don't mind. When did you know that you could do this? Take control of Derek's company? I considered the question carefully. From the first month at Horizon, I understood the power dynamics of venture capital and acquisition strategy. From the moment Derek presented my idea as his own, I knew it was theoretically possible. But I only knew it was actually happening 3 weeks ago, when our investment committee approved the acquisition plan. He nodded thoughtfully. You kept your goal in sight for 3 years, positioning yourself perfectly for this moment while we all underestimated you. That's extraordinary strategic thinking. I learned from watching you, Dad, I said truthfully. You always taught us that business success requires patience and positioning. I just applied those lessons differently than you expected. A complex emotion crossed his face, pride mingled with regret. We'll talk soon, he promised as they left. Alone in the meeting room, I took a moment to breathe deeply, processing the confrontation that had been 3 years in the making. The outcome wasn't perfect. Family reconciliations never are, but it had gone better than my worst projections and perhaps not as well as my best-case scenarios. Professional victory was complete. Personal healing would take longer. But for the first time in years, I felt the possibility of being fully seen by my family, not as they wished me to be, but as I actually was. As I prepared to return to the reception, Gabrielle knocked briefly before entering. Everything all right? As well as could be expected, I replied. Family business is rarely straightforward. She nodded with understanding. The industry doesn't need to know the personal aspects. To everyone out there, this is simply a strategic acquisition that positions you as CEO of a promising Horizon portfolio company. Thank you for that, I said sincerely. You've earned this position, Elena, she said firmly. Not just the CEO role, but my respect and the board's confidence. This acquisition made perfect business sense, regardless of the family connection. Never doubt that. Her validation mattered, a reminder that while the personal victory was satisfying, The professional achievement stood on its own merits. As we walked back toward the reception, Gabrielle added, "By the way, the integration team is ready whenever you are. Your 3-year strategy document impressed everyone. It's rare to see such comprehensive planning for a post-acquisition roadmap." I smiled slightly. I've had some time to think about it. Returning to the reception, I moved through congratulations and conversations with a new sense of completeness. For the first time, my professional identity wasn't hidden from my family behind confidentiality agreements and misunderstandings. For the first time, I didn't have to compartmentalize my achievements or downplay my authority when speaking with industry colleagues who might mention me to Derek. The weight of these parallel lives, successful venture capitalist in one context, disappointing daughter in another, had been lifted. Integration, I reflected with professional appreciation for the term, was always the most challenging aspect of any acquisition. But when successful, it created something stronger and more valuable than the separate entities had been alone. As I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the room's decorative mirrors. I looked exactly the same as I had that morning, but everything had changed. The careful strategy I'd constructed and executed over 3 long years had culminated in this moment of professional triumph and personal revelation. The path forward wouldn't be simple, particularly with Derek, but it would be authentic. And after years of being underestimated and overlooked by my own family, authenticity felt like its own form of victory. 6 months after the acquisition that changed everything, I sat in my sleek corner office overlooking Boston's Innovation District, reviewing the quarterly performance metrics for TechNexus. The numbers told a story of transformation. User adoption up 78%, churn reduced by 40%, and revenue growth tracking at RRR projections. The integration that many industry analysts had predicted would fail had instead become a case study in successful acquisition management. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 4 o'clock is here, Ms. Mitchell. Send him in," I replied, closing the performance dashboard on my monitor. The door opened to reveal Derek, dressed in business casual rather than his usual hoodie and jeans, one of many changes these past months had brought. He carried a tablet and a small potted plant, an unexpected addition that made me raise an eyebrow. "Office warming gift," he explained, placing the succulent on my credenza. "Apparently they're impossible to kill, even for workaholics who forget to water things." "Thoughtful," I noted, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "And surprisingly optimistic symbolism." "Well, growth mindset and all that corporate jargon you've been drilling into me." His tone held a hint of the old sarcasm, but lacked the bitter edge that had characterized our early interactions after the acquisition. The 6-month transition period was ending tomorrow, making this meeting the culmination of a carefully structured integration process and a moment of decision for both Derek's future with the company and our relationship as siblings. "So," I began, "let's discuss your final transition assessment." He nodded, his expression shifting to something more professional. This too was new, the ability to separate business discussions from family dynamics, a skill he'd developed out of necessity during our months working together. Quote, "Your performance as executive advisor has exceeded expectations," I said, referencing the formal evaluation I'd completed earlier that week. "The development team has maintained 92% retention under your leadership, significantly above industry standard for acquisitions. The product roadmap integration is ahead of schedule, and your institutional knowledge has proven invaluable during the client migration process." Derek accepted this assessment with a small nod. "And the areas for improvement? Financial discipline remains a challenge. You've consistently pushed for resource allocation beyond approved budgets, particularly in experimental features. And while your technical leadership is strong, your documentation and knowledge transfer protocols need standardization." He made notes on his tablet without defensive pushback. Another significant evolution from the brother who once dismissed any criticism as evidence. "I didn't understand real entrepreneurship." "Fair assessment," he acknowledged. "The financial constraints still feel limiting after running my own shop, but I understand the accountability requirements in a larger organization." The term "my own shop" caught my attention, a subtle linguistic holdover from his founder mindset. "TechNexus was your company," I corrected gently. "Now it's our division. That distinction matters for the decision we're discussing today." He met my eyes directly. "I know. That's actually what I wanted to talk about." 6 months ago, this conversation would have been fraught with resentment and wounded pride. Now it carried the weight of professional consequences balanced against personal growth. "The transition period ends tomorrow," I said. "We need to determine your ongoing role." As outlined in the original agreement, there are 3 options: separation with the previously discussed terms, continuation as technical director reporting to me, or lateral movement to another division within Horizon. Derek set his tablet aside, leaning forward slightly. "I've been thinking about this decision since day one, as you can imagine. At first, I was just angry, ready to take the payout and walk away out of pure pride." "Understandable," I acknowledged. "The circumstances were complicated." "That's one word for it." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Having your sister orchestrate a corporate takeover of your startup tends to bruise the ego." This ability to reference the acquisition with something approaching humor was perhaps the most surprising development of the past 6 months. "But something unexpected happened during this transition period," he continued. "I learned things, important things, that I never would have discovered as a founder insulated by yes men and confirmation bias." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued by this self-awareness. "Working under your leadership," he said with visible effort to maintain professional language, "showed me blind spots I didn't know I had. The financial models you implemented, the operational efficiencies, the strategic market positioning. It was like getting a masterclass in the business fundamentals I'd been ignoring while focusing on product features." This candid acknowledgement caught me off guard. "You've been an attentive student," I offered. "Not everyone in your position would have been open to learning." "I didn't have much choice," he admitted. "It was either learn or leave, and somewhere around month 3, I realized something important. I was actually enjoying the learning process. Enjoying building something with proper resources and strategic direction, rather than constantly scrambling for the next funding round." He paused, seemingly gathering thoughts for what came next. "So I'd like to propose a 4th option, one that isn't on your official list." "I'm listening." "I want to stay with TechNexus, but not as technical director. I want to create a new role, innovation strategist, focused on future product development, while leaving the operational and financial management to your stronger leadership. A role that leverages my creative strengths without requiring me to pretend I'm good at the things I'm not." The proposal was unexpected, but showed remarkable self-awareness, a recognition of both his strengths and limitations that the old Derek would have been incapable of articulating. "That's an interesting proposition," I said carefully, "but it would require you to permanently accept a subordinate position in the company you founded. Are you certain you can sustain that perspective beyond the immediate future?" 6 months ago? Absolutely not, he admitted freely. But watching how you've grown TechNexus into something far beyond what I could have built alone has been educational. My choice is between pride and growth. I'm choosing growth. I studied him for any signs of insincerity or hidden resentment, but found none. I'll need to review this with Gabrielle and the executive team. It would require a custom agreement. I've already drafted a proposal, he said, sending a document to my email with a tap on his tablet, including compensation adjustments, reporting structure and performance metrics. The thoroughness surprised me. You've given this significant thought. I've had a good teacher in corporate strategy these past 6 months, he replied with a hint of irony. As I glanced over the document, I was impressed by its professional structure and realistic scope. This is actually quite solid. When did you develop these business document skills? Turns out I was paying attention during all those integration meetings you thought I was checking sports scores through, he said with a small smile. Plus, your executive assistant might have provided some formatting guidance. I made a mental note to thank Maria for her unofficial mentoring. I'll review this thoroughly and discuss it with the leadership team. We should have an answer for you by the end of the week. He nodded, but didn't move to leave. There's one more thing we need to discuss, and it's not on any corporate agenda. Our family? I guessed. Mom and Dad have invited us both to dinner on Saturday. First time we'll all be together outside of work settings since the acquisition. The invitation wasn't unexpected. Our parents had been attempting to rebuild family connections in careful, measured steps over these months. Separate lunches, brief coffee meetings, phone calls that carefully avoided business topics until recently. Do you think we're ready for that? I asked, momentarily setting aside my CEO persona. Depends on whether we can get through a meal without turning it into a board meeting or dredging up decades of family history, Derek replied dryly. But I think it's worth trying. Mom's making her pot roast as a peace offering. The mention of our mother's signature dish, always reserved for significant family occasions, brought an unexpected wave of nostalgia. I'll be there, I promised. Business-free zone? Agreed. Though I can't promise Dad won't try to give us both entrepreneurial advice out of habit. We shared a genuine laugh at this accurate assessment of our father's inability to separate business from any family interaction, a trait both of us had clearly inherited in different ways. As Derek stood to leave, he hesitated by the door. For what it's worth, Elena, you've been a better CEO for TechNexus than I ever was. The company is achieving things I couldn't have accomplished on my own. That's not easy to admit, but it's true. The acknowledgement carried weight precisely because I knew how difficult it was for him to make it. Thank you. That means a lot, coming from the founder. Former founder, current innovation strategist, he corrected, with a hint of his old confidence. Pending approval, of course. After he left, I turned to the wall of windows overlooking the harbor, reflecting on the transformation these 6 months had brought. Not just to TechNexus as a company, but to my relationship with Derek and my place within our family. The path to this moment hadn't been straightforward. The first few weeks after the acquisition had been tense, with Derek fulfilling his contractual obligations with minimal engagement and maximum resistance. Team meetings had been exercises in diplomatic navigation as I established authority while respecting his technical expertise and institutional knowledge. The turning point came approximately 2 months in, during a critical client implementation that encountered unexpected technical challenges. Derek had stepped forward, working through the night to resolve complex integration issues that could have derailed an important enterprise contract. When I arrived the next morning to crisis management mode, I found the situation already resolved, with Derek briefing the technical team on the solution he'd developed. "You didn't have to stay all night," I'd said privately afterward. He'd looked at me with unexpected intensity. "Yes, I did. Whatever else has happened between us, this is still my technology. I won't let it fail because of personal issues." That moment of professional integrity, despite personal grievance, had opened a door to a different kind of working relationship, one based on mutual respect for each other's capabilities rather than family history or corporate hierarchy. In the months that followed, we'd established an effective, if sometimes awkward, professional dynamic. Derek's technical brilliance complemented my strategic vision and operational discipline. The integration proceeded more smoothly than anyone at Horizon had predicted, with key performance indicators consistently exceeding projections. Our parents had watched this professional reconciliation with cautious optimism, carefully maintaining separation between family interactions and business discussions. Dad had surprised me by never once second-guessing my leadership decisions, even when they contradicted approaches he would have taken. Mom had made efforts to show equal interest in both our professional lives, though she sometimes still slipped into old patterns of focusing more on Derek's activities. As I returned to my desk, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Confirmed for Saturday at 7. Dad's bringing that Bordeaux you liked from Christmas. Looking forward to having both my brilliant business leaders at the table." Red heart. The simple message illustrated how far we'd come. The acknowledgement of my leadership role alongside Derek's contribution, the easy inclusion of both of us in family plans. The equilibrium felt new and still somewhat fragile, but it was progress I wouldn't have thought possible 6 months ago. My desk phone rang, Gabrielle Wang's direct line. "Elena," she said when I answered, "the quarterly numbers for TechNexus are exceptional. The board is impressed. Your integration strategy has become something of a template for our other acquisitions. Thank you. The team has performed beyond expectations. Including your brother," she noted. "His technical leadership during the enterprise client onboarding was particularly valuable." How are things progressing with his transition decision? He's just left my office, actually. He's proposing a custom role, innovation strategist, focusing on product development while leaving operational management to my team. Interesting, she replied thoughtfully. Not the outcome I would have predicted 6 months ago. Can he sustain that subordinate position without resentment? I believe he can, I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my assessment. He's demonstrated remarkable growth during this transition period. As have you, Gabrielle observed. Managing an acquisition is challenging under normal circumstances. Managing one involving family dynamics at this level of complexity requires exceptional leadership skills. You've handled it with remarkable professionalism. Her validation meant more than she likely realized. Acknowledgement of the delicate balance I'd maintained between business objectives and personal relationships during this complicated integration. The board has taken notice, she continued. We're discussing expanding your portfolio responsibilities beyond this single acquisition. There's consideration of creating a new division focused on productivity and collaboration tools, with you as executive vice president. It would mean overseeing multiple companies, including potential future acquisitions in the space. The promotion would represent a significant advancement, moving from managing a single acquired company to directing an entire market vertical within Horizon's portfolio structure. I'm honored by the consideration, I replied, mind already racing with possibilities. Would this affect my direct oversight of TechNexus? You'd maintain strategic control, but would need to appoint a day-to-day operational CEO reporting to you. Someone who understands the technology and company culture, but can implement your broader vision for the division. The implication was clear, and the timing of this conversation immediately following Derek's proposal seemed unlikely to be coincidental. Gabrielle Wang didn't achieve her position without masterful strategic thinking. I'll need to consider the organizational structure carefully, I said diplomatically. Of course, we'll discuss details next week. In the meantime, congratulations on TechNexus's performance. However complicated the personal aspects might have been, the business outcome has been unquestionably successful. After hanging up, I turned back to the harbor view, processing this new development. The potential promotion represented exactly the kind of strategic growth I'd been positioning myself for: expanded authority, portfolio-level influence, and recognition of my leadership capabilities beyond a single company. But it also created an unexpected opportunity for Derek. If I moved up to division leadership, the operational gap at TechNexus would need filling. His proposed innovations strategist role could evolve into something more significant, not the CEO position he'd lost, but perhaps a chief product officer role with meaningful authority within a defined scope. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, Derek had taken my idea and built a company around it. Now, I had taken his company and could potentially create a position for him that leveraged his strengths while addressing his weaknesses. A more equitable exchange than either of us might have expected 6 months ago. As evening settled over Boston, I closed my laptop and prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow would bring decisions about both our professional futures and the continuing evolution of our family dynamics. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but it contained possibilities I wouldn't have imagined during those years of silent planning and careful positioning. Saturday evening arrived with unexpected nervousness. I stood outside my parents' suburban home, a bottle of wine in hand, feeling strangely like a visitor despite having grown up in this house. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal Mom, her expression warm and slightly anxious. "Elena!" Right on time, as always. She pulled me into a hug that felt both familiar and somehow new, the embrace of someone seeing me clearly for perhaps the first time. "Derek's already here, helping your father with the grill." The backyard presented a scene of domestic normalcy that belied the complex history between us. Dad stood at his prized grill, gesturing emphatically about proper temperature control, while Derek arranged vegetables on the side tray. They looked up as I approached, a momentary hesitation passing between us before Dad stepped forward. "There she is, Horizon's newest executive VP," he announced proudly. "Derek told us about your promotion. Congratulations, Elena." The news of my promotion had been finalized just yesterday. Derek must have heard through company channels. "Thank you. It's not official until next week, but yes, I'll be heading a new division." And apparently creating a fancy new role for your little brother in the process, Derek added, his tone light but carrying a hint of complex emotion. Chief Product Officer has a nice ring to it. You've earned it, I replied simply. Your technical leadership these past months has been exceptional. Dad watched this exchange with evident satisfaction. My two executives, he said, putting an arm around each of our shoulders in a gesture that felt both familiar and transformed. Who would have thought you'd end up working together after all? In a manner of speaking, Derek said dryly. In the most productive manner possible, I amended. Derek creates, I strategize and operationalize. It's a more effective partnership than either of us competing in the same lane. Dad nodded thoughtfully. Different strengths, complementary skills. Makes sense from a business perspective. And from a family one, Mom added, joining us with a tray of drinks. Less competition, more collaboration. Derek caught my eye over the rim of his glass, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. The journey from bitter rivalry to professional respect had been neither simple nor straight, but we had arrived at a place of equilibrium that honored both our capabilities. Dinner passed with surprising ease. Conversations flowing between business topics and family memories without the undercurrent of comparison and judgment that had characterized so many previous gatherings. Dad asked thoughtful questions about my strategic vision for the new division. Mom showed genuine interest in the technical innovations Derek was developing. The painful hierarchy that had defined our family dynamics for decades had been replaced by something more balanced and mutually respectful. As we moved to the living room for coffee, Dad cleared his throat in the way that always signaled a prepared statement was coming. I owe both of you an apology, he began, setting his cup down carefully. For years, I measured success by a single standard, my standard. I celebrated Derek's path because it mirrored my own, without recognizing that Elena's different approach might lead to equal or greater achievements. Mom reached over to squeeze his hand supportively. Watching you both these past 6 months, seeing how your different strengths have combined to create something neither could have built alone, has been a powerful lesson for me. I was wrong to create a hierarchy of business paths in our family, and I'm sorry for the damage that caused. The acknowledgement, so long overdue, felt like the closing of an old wound, not erasing the scar, but allowing it to finally heal properly. I made my own mistakes, Derek admitted. I took Elena's idea without acknowledgement, convinced myself it was justified, because I was the quote 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 quote. That arrogance cost us both years of trust and very nearly the company itself. And I chose secrecy and strategic revenge over direct confrontation, I acknowledged. I could have addressed the situation differently without the 3-year silent campaign. But would we have learned the same lessons? Mom asked unexpectedly. Elena, would you have developed the skills that earned you this promotion without that determination to prove yourself? Derek, would you have recognized your strengths and weaknesses so clearly without experiencing both sides of the power dynamic? Her insight surprised us all. This perspective from the family member who had often seemed least engaged with our business ambitions. Sometimes, the most difficult paths teach us what we truly need to learn, she continued. Not that I'm excusing anyone's behavior, but perhaps this complicated journey was necessary for both of you to reach your current understanding. Derek raised his coffee cup in a small toast. To necessary journeys, then, and to family businesses, however unconventionally arranged. I joined the toast, reflecting on the truth in Mom's observation. The path to this moment had been neither straightforward nor entirely righteous on anyone's part. It had been messy, painful, and at times morally ambiguous, as most significant growth experiences tend to be. Yet the outcome wasn't just professional success or family reconciliation. It was something more valuable: self-knowledge. Derek had discovered his true strengths and accepted his limitations. I had learned to claim my achievements openly rather than building power from the shadows. Our parents had expanded their understanding of success beyond a single entrepreneurial model. None of us was the same person who had attended that awards ceremony 6 months ago. We had each been transformed by the collision of family dynamics with business realities. emerging with clearer understanding of ourselves and each other. Later that evening, as Derek walked me to my car, he paused in the driveway. "You know, for all the drama and wounded pride, I'm actually grateful for how this turned out," he said, looking back at the house. "Not just the professional opportunity, but this. Being able to sit at a family dinner without constant comparison and competition. It's been a long road to get here," I acknowledged. "Worth the journey, though." He offered his hand in a gesture that felt deliberately formal. "To successful partnerships, Ms. Executive Vice President." I bypassed the handshake and hugged him instead, a gesture that would have felt impossible 6 months ago. "To successful partnerships, Mr. Chief Product Officer." As I drove away, I reflected on the lessons of these transformative months. The acquisition that had begun as a strategic reclaiming of my stolen idea had evolved into something far more valuable, a reimagining of both professional and family relationships based on authentic recognition of each person's true capabilities. The Mitchell family entrepreneurial legacy hadn't ended. It had expanded to encompass different paths to success, different expressions of business acumen. The narrow definition that had once excluded me had broadened to celebrate multiple forms of leadership and innovation. The journey had required patience, strategic thinking, and ultimately forgiveness, from all sides. It had demanded growth beyond comfortable patterns and familiar hierarchies. But the result was a more honest and balanced family dynamic, one that recognized each member's unique strengths rather than measuring everyone against a single standard. As Boston's skyline came into view, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond professional achievement. The long game I had played wasn't just about reclaiming an idea or proving my worth. It was about creating the conditions for authentic recognition, the kind that comes not from external validation, but from being truly seen for who you are and what you contribute. That recognition, so long denied within my family, had finally arrived, not through force or manipulation, but through demonstrated excellence and ultimate reconciliation. The victory wasn't in acquiring Derek's company, or even in my subsequent promotion. It was in transforming a family system that had once diminished my path into one that could celebrate different forms of success with equal enthusiasm. The journey wasn't over. Family healing never follows a simple linear progression, but we had established a new foundation based on mutual respect and authentic recognition of each other's strengths. That foundation would support whatever came next, both professionally and personally. Sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be. Not where we initially set out to go, but to a destination that offers something more valuable than simple revenge or vindication. In my case, that destination wasn't just professional success or family reconciliation. It was the freedom to be fully myself, recognized, respected, and valued for my unique contribution rather than measured against someone else's standard. That freedom, I reflected as I pulled into my parking space, was worth every step of the complicated path that had led me here. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.